Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of ASEC Conversations. Today, our special guest is former Arizona State and Olympic basketball great Joe Caldwell. At this time, I'll turn it over to our host, Janae Reeves. Janae?
Thank you, Denise. Hi, Joe. It's really nice to meet you. One of the coolest things that I've read about you is that you didn't start playing basketball until your junior year in high school. What sparked your interest in playing?
Well, when I was growing up back in Texas, my brother Eddie Caldwell was all everything. And I wanted to play baseball and all that stuff. But I tried to play basketball in Texas in junior high school. But when I moved to California, my sister had me at Gompers Junior High School. And that's when I started playing basketball.
And how hard was it for you to move away from your parents in Texas to go all the way to California?
Well, if you knew my father said nobody leaves this house until they're 21 years old. And for my mother to convince my father to let me go and live with my sister was like pulling the eye teeth out of a tiger. He didn't want none of us to leave until we were 21, and then you're gone. So when he finally consented that I could go live with my sister at 12 years old, and my sister Mary, she raised me and my brother-in-law Willie.
What was it like growing up being one of 11 children?
Well, actually, there was 13 of us. My mama lost my brother and my sister during birth. So 11 of us living. And when you look back on it and you think about your family, you think about the guys that was around you all the time, your friends and your brothers and sisters. And my brother Ernie was probably the best softball pitcher in Texas at the time. He took Galveston County to the state championship. My brother Cecil, my brother Ed, they all play sports. My sister Hazel, she was the first women basketball player. And she had to play during those days when you couldn't go across half court. You know, they had 3 on one side, 3 on the other. And she was a good basketball player. So sports has been always in my family. My dad was a baseball player. My first love in the game was baseball. I wanted to play baseball. He said, they don't let black people play baseball. And I started crying, Dad, I want to go. I want to play. I want to play. He said, go out there and put the rag down, boy. What do you think second base is? So I go out and I put the rag down. He took a Coca-Cola bottle, back in those days was big. You remember the big Coca-Cola bottles? And turned it upside down and sit on it and threw and hit that rag I had out there. And I said, Dad, he said, go, now you hit it. And I threw the ball all over the place. He said, get under the car and take the motor out of the car. I cried, but sports has been in our family for generations. So that's, and I don't know, other than Eddie Caldwell, when he was playing, he went to Texas Southern, and I kind of like patterned my life after him because he did football, basketball, and baseball. And he was even the homecoming queen in football. So he ran track and field, he did everything. He was just unbelievable. So all this athletic stuff came through the family.
Was there an athlete at any point you aspired to be like growing up?
Well, my dad kind of had me. He was crazy about Joe Louis. That's where I got my name from. Because his story was in the family that every time Joe Louis knocked somebody out, he had one of us. So we had 13 of them. So I know for sure Joe Louis knocked out 13 people. It was funny because my dad used to tell all the time he chose Joe Louis as his famous athlete. So when I got old enough and I met Mr. Lewis, I told him the story. He just said, "Thank you, young man," and shook my hand. But he was a good guy. I think, and during that time frame, Joe Lewis was probably the guy that I patterned my life after in some ways.
On your road to college, the legendary John Wooden courted you to play at UCLA, but you chose Arizona State. What made you make that decision?
Well, I was on campus, by the way, at UCLA. Fremont High School, I wasn't prepared as far as college. I didn't have English and Spanish. So UCLA had put me into a junior college there, Santa Monica Junior College. And I'm on campus at UCLA. I'm going to be a Bruin. Then one night about 9 o'clock, a knock on the door. That was Fanny Markham, the assistant coach, and Dr. Jose Burrell. So they said, let's take a ride. I said, I'm not going down to Arizona. It's too hot. It's too hot. I'm not going. He said, well, take a ride with us. Let's talk. I said, okay. So I got in the car with, being 17 years old, what do you know? Next thing I know, we on I-10 heading towards Arizona. And that's how I got here. And then UCLA, Coach Wooten and his whole staff never raised a question. So I said, well, if Arizona wants me here that bad, I'm going to stay. And it's been the best move that I've ever made. That's staying put right here.
As you played throughout college, what was your most exciting memory through that time?
College, I would say probably the time we played the Bruins face up and we beat them in the tournament. We had them down 30 points and Ned took us out instead of let us weigh him out, make him suffer for leaving us there. I played with some great teammates. I give all the stuff that I've accomplished in basketball to all my teammates. If they wouldn't have been good, I would have never been known. So they was there for me and I was there for them. So we still talk every once in a while together.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were drafted number 2 overall by the Detroit Pistons in the 1964 NBA draft. So where does that rank for you as a life-defining moment?
Well, back in those days, they didn't have this kind of entertainment that they have now. They said you're drafted number 2, here's where you go. So, but I had a chance through all the gods and all the wonderful things that life have to offer that some 20 or 30 years later, my grandson be in the draft and he goes number 2, same as his grandpa. I didn't get any better than that. I was reliving my life in his because we both got drafted number 2. And I think that we are the only couple that I know of that have grandson and grandpa that have been drafted number 2 by the NBA. So that's a good memory.
And for me, as an aspiring agent, during the infancy of the NBA, players were unable to, have agent representation. So what was it like negotiating directly with ownership?
It's like you got to figure though, all those guys were qualified businessmen, knew the numbers. I was a college basketball player, never took a business course, didn't know what a P&L was. It was like going to the slaughterhouse. They were so far advanced. But all I knew that I wasn't going to work no more than 1 year for each one of them. And they wanted me to sign more years, but I didn't. I said, no, just 1 year. He said, what if you get hurt, Joe? I said, well, if I get hurt, I'm gone. And so, but later on, I think it started in 1968 or 69, they started allowing players to have agents. And then it mushroomed from there.
And you went through that time, you went through a lot of hardships and roadblocks. So how was it navigating through that and what helped you persevere?
My mom used to tell me, and she said, 2 things you do: respect yourself, respect your family, respect your country, obey the law, try to do the best you can when you do it. And she said, God take care of fools and babies. And she said, you both of them. So I said, okay, Mom. So my mom, with her prayers and everything, is what I think is the reason why I'm still here today, because those things I never left. I never left God out of my life. And I respect my family. I respect everybody that I talk to. So that's the difference, I think. That's why I'm here. Because most of my friends that I knew that played with me are gone. And I don't know whether they did something bad. I can't tell you. All I know is I stay true to my mom and my dad teaching.
Paul Rubin wrote in his 2010 article, the dude was LeBron James before LeBron's parents were born. So how does that make you feel?
Well, I read that and I started laughing, by the way, Janet. And I thought about who was that they were saying that I was ahead of not LeBron James but Michael Jordan, and I was sitting there thinking about all those guys, and when I was in Detroit, Magic Johnson was, I think, was in the ninth, might have been in the 11th grade. He was a baby. And when I was in North Carolina, um, uh, Michael Jordan was in high school, and I played in all those cities, and I'm pretty sure they saw me play back in those days because they was kids. And when Paul Rubin said I'm ahead of LeBron James, he just jumped over all the other ones, and I kind of chuckled with it because it was an honor that he even thought in his article that I was LeBron James before his mom and dad was born, and that was, to me, that's what I keep saying. What better can you? How better can you explain life? You know. And when I'm sitting around and thinking about all this stuff and wondering what happened and why I'm not this and that, for some reason God takes me on that trip, takes me back through the explosion in Texas City, Texas, moving to California, all the good things. So those are the good things that I remember, and I don't dwell on the bad things. I just move on with the good.
You said you were from Texas and then you eventually moved. So how did that explosion make you feel? And if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it was 47. I'm 6 years old, and we lived on Texas City Avenue, and Texas City Avenue is from the chemical company that blew up, was probably a half a mile away. And when it blew, I started to run because I was in the backyard with my dad. He grabbed me and said, "Boy, where you going?" I said, "Everybody's running. I'm gonna run too." He said, "Sit down here." He said, "You get killed out there." And as a young kid, we sitting on the porch and we watching people running by. They was on fire. And the second blast went up. I saw this man floating through the air. I said, it looked like something was sticking in his chest. And here I'm 79 years old, and every once in a while I still see that. So at 6 years old, we don't know what the mindset is, but that stayed with me, and it's still with me to this day. And my family was very lucky. My oldest sister, was the only one that really got hurt. She was washing the windows at the department store and it collapsed and it stuck in her collarbone. They removed glass from her neck for at least about 10 years. They wouldn't take the glass out because it would collapse the collarbone. And they'd let the bone push it up. Every time they pushed it up, she had to have it removed. And then when you think about what your mom says, that God will take care of you, and you look at all the people that was killed in Texas City, Texas, during that explosion, it was the worst disaster in American history in 46. And I have pictures around my house about it. I look back at the area of the zone in which, when the explosion go, we was like 3 levels out. And that old house that my mom and dad built withstood the blast and knocked a hole in the roof and all that stuff. But that's something you'll never forget. It was such a traumatic thing for a young man at that time.
What are your thoughts right now about athletes all over the world that are speaking out for social justice and racial equality?
I think it's good, and it was good during my time. We had guys doing that. For the guy, my good friend Muhammad Ali, he was doing that. Lou Brock was doing that. Kurt Flood was doing that. But back in those days, it was not like it is now, where all the guys seemed to bind together and said, "This has got to stop." So it's an individual thing. The orchestrators of all this mess got to look at it and say, these young people got a really serious question here. They are trying to tell you got to stop this. And I'm proud of them. I just wish they stay together and don't leave the ship until it's reached the port.
Absolutely. And is there a career accomplishment you are most proud of?
Well, I have 2 wonderful daughters, and both of them are doing extremely well. I have two grandsons that's doing extremely well. So those are compliments. It's kind of hard to focus on one, but if as an athletic thing, I would say the 1964 Olympics. Here I went from Texas City, Texas, to California, to Arizona, and by the time I'm 23 years old, I'm in a foreign country, and we playing against the Russians during the Cold War, and we beat everybody in the Olympics to become the best 12 men in the world. Now, I don't think I get any better than that. I would love to have won a world championship in the NBA, but I don't. I think that world championship in the pros, as a college kid, they don't play them college kids anymore either. They play pro now. We play all professional players now. They may have one or two college players, but back in my days, we had all, except for we had six of them. I think the other semi-pros was the AAU team back in those days. So it's kind of when you ask what is emotion. As a father, I'm grateful for my kids, and as an accomplishment, the United States Olympics is ultimate.
Having the opportunity to play in college, in the NBA, and then on the U.S. Olympic team, what do you feel like? How do you feel basketball has made an impact on you on and off the court?
Well, later on in life, when I got through dealing with all the guys telling me about how much you could make, but the later years when I found an agent, he got me into one of the greatest basketball contracts ever. So I'm thankful that I had an ability to present myself and my image, that I could negotiate something of that magnitude, and that's what I've been. To me, that's the most powerful piece of contract that I've signed in my whole entire NBA career and EBA. So I'm proud of that, and that's why I'm still saying good. Life is good. Basketball is good to me. My family's good. What more could you want in life?
And speaking of contracts, the Los Angeles Rams offered you $17,000 to come and play football. Did you ever consider making the switch to play football?
Well, they came at me and said, I said, well, I played 1 year with the Detroit Pistons. And then they came back and said, well, we need you. I said, well, why? He said, well, we're going to throw it into the end zone and we're going to throw it high and you're going to jump up and catch it. And all you got to do is hang on to it. I said, man, they're killing you people. Them guys be hitting you back in those days. It wasn't no illegal hit like they got now. I said, I'm not going to take that beating for $17,000 a year. So they left me alone. So I went on back to Detroit and then I went to St. Louis.
And looking back at your life, what was the greatest lesson you think you've learned?
Respect. Respect your mom, your dad, your family. Do the best you can. Yeah, all this mess going on around you, you just got to grab hold to yourself. You just can't. It's respect, honor. If you believe in those things, then respect the law.
Lastly, I wanted to be the first to say congratulations on being inducted to the Arizona Sports Hall of Fame. What does this honor mean to you?
Well, when you look back as an athlete and you count all your blessings, and I go back and I won the city champion for the Fremont High School. We won it 3 years in a row, and they put me in the Hall of Fame, the Ham Hall of Fame. And then I came to Arizona State. They put me in the ASU Hall of Fame. And it's been said I've not been part of it, that I'm in the United States Olympic Hall of Fame. But this is where most of my life was generated from 17 until 25 and 26, and still today has been Arizona. So I am honored and proud that I'm a member of the Arizona Hall of Fame. That's been part of the whole mechanism of making an athlete the person he is. I appreciate all the accomplishments. I appreciate the committee for putting me in, because it is wonderful feeling that I have.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was an honor, truly. So nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for your time, your insight, and your stories today, Joe. What a great conversation. And for all of you who tuned in, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on ASEC Conversations.